Welcome to Your College Bound Kid,
a podcast for parents, college counselors, students, and anyone who wants a weekly deep dive into the world of college admissions.
My name is Julia. I was an admission officer at Haverford College, an outside reader for Emory University, and I currently work as a school-based counselor at a school in Massachusetts.
I'm Lisa, and I'm a clinical psychologist and college counselor. I have a daughter in college, a daughter in high school, and a son in middle school. After 30 years in Chicago, we recently moved to North Carolina.
My name is Mark. I'm a college coach in Atlanta and the parent of two daughters. Karis, a graduate of Davidson College, and she is the founder of the Spanish tutoring company, SpanishHelpToday.com. And Joy is a wellness coach at the Canaan Flagler Business School at the University of North Carolina in Chapel Hill. And I'm so blessed to be able to work alongside both my beautiful daughters at School Match for You, a college counseling firm that I founded in 2010. Good morning, friends. If you're new to the Your College Bound Kid podcast, our mission is to make college knowledge available to all. And we do that by providing over 10 hours of commercial-free content every month, with episodes every Monday and every Thursday. We have 9 co-hosts who have over 200 years of counseling and admissions experience. And our focus is on the importance of match and fit over rankings, and we believe every student has limitless potential if they can unlock their mind, dream big, work hard, pursue what they love and what they're good at, and persevere through tough times. Now, I'm in a really great mood today. It's June 1st, and on June 15th, we will have lived in our home 16 years. Talk about life flying by on you. And every day I get up and I say, how can I beautify the grounds? And it's a full body workout. And I get out there at 6:30, unless it's raining, and I feel great mentally and physically. And this is the best the grounds have looked in my 16 years. So I'm pretty happy. All my hard work's paying off. But what has me really, really even happier today, I grew up in a family that believed in taking family vacations. Both my parents were educators, so they had their summers off. We took full advantage of that and traveled a lot, just in the U.S. and Canada, not really internationally much, although we went to Bermuda like every 5 years because my mom's from Bermuda. But they really bequeathed that passion to me, and it's a tradition I've kept up with my family. We travel a lot. Every year we take family trips, and we also take what my kids call daddy-daughter trips. And that's been a lot of fun for me. And literally, as soon as this podcast is edited and off to Nemanja, our sound engineer for production, Karis and I are going to Helen, Georgia for 4 days. We return on Wednesday. Helen's only 85 miles from here. But we haven't had a daddy-daughter trip in a few years. And Helen is in North Georgia, the mountains. It's a picturesque Bavarian alpine village nestled in the North Georgia mountains. And it was originally a logging town, but it totally reinvented itself in 1969 by adopting old world German architecture. So we've been talking about going to Helen for years, and we're finally doing it. And we're excited. Like every building in downtown Helen adheres to this strict alpine design code with cobblestone streets, colorful murals. So from everything I read, we should have a good time, good cohesive aesthetic. It's like stepping into a European village, but you only have to go 85 miles away. Airbnb for 4 days and 3 nights, and I'm pretty stoked about it. But let's talk about today's podcast. And I'm going to open up by sharing an email that came in that I feel can help our listeners. And I want to add a few comments after I read the email. Then I'm going to share another lesson from the counseling room. And I'm going to mention 9 things rising seniors should be doing over the next 60 days. And then, as promised, I'm going to share with you some tips to help with your personal statement. You'll hear the final part of Dr. John Pollard's excellent breakdown of Franke Honors College, University of Arizona. And then finally, an opportunity from Kevin Newton that you may be interested in if you want to learn more about international university options. So this episode is going to be a little longer than our Monday episodes. So much for me when I originally started this Monday episode 3 years ago. The idea was long one on Thursday, short one on Monday, and that happens most of the time, but not always. By the way, shout out to Vince Garcia, Susan Tree, and Julia Esquivel. They joined our podcast co-host team this time 2022. So they're celebrating their third anniversary on our podcast, and it really excited. It was then when we went to the 2 episodes. We couldn't have done it without the extra support and talent on our team. So are you ready to dive in? So the email I'm going to read is from Dr. Michelle Finkel. And friends, I never share full names, but Michelle said, yeah, go ahead and share my name. I'm cool with that. So I'm putting it out there. So here it goes. Hi, Mark. Love the podcast. I'm a medical school admissions counselor and a retired physician. And I just finished listening to your 2-part podcast discussion about how students can access undergraduate institutions with a career in medicine in mind. Your points were accurate and well considered. 2 key phrases that Susan and you used in the first episode that stood out to me were permission structure and alternative pathways. These concepts are important for students to understand because they emphasize that there isn't just one rigid path to medical school. Along those lines, and this is the reason I'm reading this, by the way, this paragraph. Along these lines, I want to mention the option of pursuing a post-baccalaureate program after college for college students who discover their enthusiasm for medicine later. Choosing a career in medicine at 17 or 18 can feel premature for a lot of kids. Post-baccalaureate programs offer a fantastic opportunity for those who might not have initially followed a traditional pre-med track. Anyone interested in exploring these options, the AAMC Post-Baccalaureate database, specifically searching the left panel for special program focus and then career changer programs, is a great resource. I have a dear med school friend who went to undergrad and wasn't initially on a pre-med track. After graduation, she worked on Wall Street before deciding to pursue a career in medicine. She left finance, completed a post-baccalaureate program, went to Harvard Med School, and is now a practicing cardiologist. Also, I want to keep this message brief, but Susan's point in the second episode about looking for other career options in the medical field is excellent. For example, clinical care extenders like physician's assistants, PAs, are in high demand and command robust salaries, and that popularity will likely continue with the increased corporatization of medicine. Anyway, thanks for all you do. I have a junior and a freshman in high school. Your podcasts are so helpful, and I frequently take notes and share them with my husband and kids, so we appreciate you. So we appreciate you, Michelle. Thank you for taking the time to write in and share that. And I wanted to read that because Michelle is absolutely spot on. We never talked about post-baccalaureate programs, and they're absolutely great opportunities for future doctors. And there's a couple types. They're the career changer programs. Sometimes people think of those as more like core curriculum programs, because you have to have some classes, and you might have majored in something else that didn't take those classes. You don't want to go all the way back and get a bachelor's. And these programs are typically, they vary, but they're typically 1 year if you do it full-time, often 2 years if you do it part-time. So the more core career curriculum programs, you're going to make sure you get your 2 semesters of lab sciences in biology. So you're going to take classes like molecular, cell, genetics, physiology basics. Then you're going to have to get your 2 semesters with labs in for organic, and you're going to do things there like molecular structure, reaction mechanism, synthesis, stuff like that. And then the general chemistry, you're going to have to get 2 semesters with general chemistry with labs. And so there you're studying things like atomic structure, chemical bonding, thermodynamics, other things as well beyond my pay grade, outside of my expertise. And then, of course, the 2 semesters of physics with labs, electricity, magnetism, waves and optics, things like that. And then you're going to have math. That's going to vary from school to school, what you're going to need. A lot of times calculus, but not always. Statistics, highly recommend it. Certain amount of English and writing if you didn't get it. And then increasingly biochemistry is expected. So there's those programs. And then there's other programs. Sometimes people think of these as academic enhancer programs. Maybe you need to improve your GPA to show academic readiness to be competitive. And so you might take some upper level classes in molecular biology, physiology, immunology, things like that. Or some of them involve like MCAT prep. And also you might do some graduate level biomedical science classes. Sometimes they involve shadowing experiences or getting some clinical exposure. So I just thought that was a great addition, and we never talked about it, and I appreciate her sending that in. The other thing I would have liked to talk more about is EAP. I'm really big on EAP. That's an acronym for Early Access Programs. I love these programs. We briefly touched on it, but there's a lot more we could say. Much bigger fan of EAP programs than the BSMD programs. I've worked with a lot of students that have done both. If anyone is more curious about that, you can send in a QFL. We can address it. I feel like I'm already kind of getting into the weeds on this more than I wanted to, but thanks, Michelle, for that, and hopefully that was helpful for you. So, in the counseling room this week, so I get a question about 3 times a year, and it's usually asked from a parent in a family meeting with their student there. And it's usually a parent who knew pretty early on what they wanted to do. They knew they wanted to be an attorney, and from the time they were 13 and they were an attorney. They knew they wanted to be an entrepreneur from the time they were 16 and they're an entrepreneur or physician or whatever, dentist. It really doesn't matter. But the parent sort of has the perspective that it's a bit of a problem that my student doesn't know what they want to do right now. And I'm hoping you can help them with that. I got that this week from a family in California. And so I thought I would share with you how I answer that question, because I get it 3 to 4 times a year. I get very biographical, and perhaps this is my own bias, but I do believe that getting biographical makes a point. So let me just tell you how I respond. So I first of all share a little bit about my background, some things that I haven't even shared on here before. So I graduated from Michigan State. When I was at Michigan State, I just became consumed with trying to understand the Bible. So I was like, I got to understand this Bible more. So it led me to go spend a year in Chicago at the Moody Bible Institute. And you have to do practical Christian ministries there. So I did one at the Audi Home, which is a juvenile detention center in Chicago. 85 of the 300 people in there are in there for like serious crimes like juvenile murder. And that was a counseling internship. And then I did another one at Korean Presbyterian Church. It was like a preaching one. And I figured I'd do one in counseling, one in preaching, and then I would sort of figure out which one I want to go in. Well, after the full year, I thought, I think I want to go in the preaching. So I went to Dallas Theological Seminary for multiple years and pursued that, got a master's in biblical studies, another master's in theology. And I also took a year off and did college admissions when I was in Dallas. And then I moved to Philadelphia to start a church from scratch. And I realized pretty soon this isn't for me. And then I did 6 years of business to business professional sales for 2 Fortune 500 companies. And I never really found my passion for mission and college counseling until I was into my mid-30s. Let's talk about my daughter, Karis. Karis, Westtown School has an outstanding Spanish department. So Karis, when we moved to Atlanta, she had this really, really strong Spanish foundation. And at the age of 14, she was already getting paid by the KIPP schools to tutor KIPP students that were struggling in Spanish, like 9th and 10th graders. So she started tutoring at a really young age. And then she went to Davidson. She graduated in Spanish at Davidson. She took 5 trips to Honduras before she was 19, immersion trips. And then she taught at a private middle and high school Spanish. And then she realized, I don't think this is for me. And then she said, I want to be a professional baker. She thought of going back to school for that, but she was advised, no, you kind of don't need to do that. Make a long story short, she ended up qualifying, going to Los Angeles, competing in a baking contest. She finished in the top 2, and then she appeared on the Great American Baking, show. You guys know about that. If you're a longtime listener, I shared it on here. And some of you even watched her, and she eventually got kicked off the island or whatever they call it. But she made it to like the final 4 or 5. But then she realized that wasn't for her. Now she's doing tutoring like full time. Her business is booming. I want to say she had 17 or 18 clients from one school in Atlanta, and just as many from Los Angeles. And she loves it. She's actually expanded her staff, has brought on another tutor. She's now doing math and Spanish, and she's living her best life. But the point is this. I didn't know until my mid-30s what I was going to do. She didn't know until age 27 what she wanted to do. Let's look at my other daughter, Joy. Joy goes off, gets a master's degree in clinical mental health counseling, thinking about going into private practice. Halfway through, she's not feeling it. She tells her advisor, I don't know if I like this private practice. Well, the advisor had some connections at Duke and was able to get her in at Duke as a grad assistant. So if you don't know that area, Duke, North Carolina, Chapel Hill, North Carolina State, and then North Carolina Central, 4 major schools all in the Research Triangle. And there's others like Meredith and others as well. But there's, it's booming area for business, for colleges. So she does this experience at Duke and she absolutely loves it. And they loved her. And they said, we're going to hire you, but we need to wait for an FTE opening, which is full-time equivalent. So she finishes up there and there's not an opening. She's got to get a job. So she goes into private practice. She does not like it. So about a year goes by and then there's an opening at both UNC and Duke, both at the same time to do wellness coaching. She goes through the process for both. She has opportunities at both, but the UNC opportunity was a lot better. She takes it. She's living her best life. She's loving it. Just got back from Thailand a few days ago, 2 weeks in Thailand with 21 Keenan Flagler business students from UNC. And she gets to do a trip like that every year. Global immersion trip with the business students. And she works with them. One more story. My brother, he graduates from Waterloo, which is like the MIT of Canada in engineering. He does civil engineering for 10 years. Now, Waterloo is co-op. So I grew up like my brother was co-oping all over the place. I want to say he did like 5 co-ops. So you would think, well, after 5 co-ops, does he know what he wants to do? Actually not. After 10 years, he switches. He gets into commercial land development and real estate development. 10 years later, he's selling like 3D printers to multi-million-dollar defense industry. Lockheed Martin is his biggest client, Northrop Grumman. These are his clients. And he's living his best life. The point is this. It's extremely hard to know what you want to do at age 16 or 17 or 22. I remember telling a friend of mine in my, I don't know, I was like late 30s, early 40s. I was like, man, I'm just living my best life. I just love what I'm doing. And his name was Steve. And he said, wow, I'm 46 and I'm still trying to figure that out. It's really hard to know. But guess what? There's no need for a student to have to know now. Just keep pursuing what you love and what you're good at. And at the end, there will almost always be a way for you to monetize what you're good at and what you love and make a living out of it. Plus, we're not living in an era anymore where you go get a job at 22 and do it for 43 years and retire at 65. People have multiple careers, maybe as many as 6 or 7. So I just want you to know that's my take on if it's a crisis or even a cause of concern if your teenager doesn't know what they want to do. It will work out. Just keep pursuing what you love, what you're good at, and eventually you'll find your way there. So those are my thoughts. All right, let's transition. So what should a rising senior be doing now? Well, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this because I talked about this pretty recently, but it is June 1st, and now is the time to hunker down and get serious, especially if you're done school. I know there's all over the country. It's so weird because I'll work with one student who's done school May 11th, and then I'll work with another student who's not done school until June 25th. So it really varies in the country when you finish up your junior year. But the goal is for you to complete almost every application that is due in the fall. There are a lot of 11-1 deadlines, early action, early decision, increasingly more 10-15 deadlines. We tell our students at School Match for You, the company I founded, we want 80% of everything done by Labor Day and the final 20% by October 10th for anything due in the fall. You know, one pet peeve admission officers have, and they've frequently voiced it, is why do we have to get more than 50% of our applications in the last 3 days? You knew the deadline. Do you know how much it would help with our planning and organization and assigning files to get read early rather than the glut that come in? Well, you know, let's not make it about admission officers. Let's make it about you. There are multiple reasons why you want to get this stuff done. One is going to significantly decrease your stress. I tell students that if you're doing the college application process full blown fall of your senior year, think of it as adding 2 classes to your workload. Secondly, a lot of schools have priority admissions deadlines, meaning your chances will be increased if you meet that deadline. And then a lot of schools have priority scholarship deadlines, meaning in some cases, you're not eligible for scholarship money if you don't meet the deadline. All right, so here are 9 things that I tell our students to do, and I'm sharing it with you, especially for your do-it-yourselfers. 1, you should be researching and finalizing your college list, and it should be a balanced list. I'd like to see students get that done by the 15th of July. If you won't know what applications to work on if you don't know where you're applying. It doesn't always work out perfectly. I realize there's that school that you want to visit in September or even October, and you don't want to do the application until you visit. I get it. But you should be working to be really close to finalizing your list by mid-July. Next, if you're not done testing, finish it up in the summer. Absolute last administration I like to see people take is September. Now there's an ACT and an SAT in September, but I actually prefer July, which is the date for the ACT, or August for the SAT as your final date if you're taking testing, and be done with it so you can move on. There's a lot of peace of mind. You can just clear stuff off your plate. It's like taking a load of weight off your shoulders. Next, get your personal statement done. The prompts have been out since the 27th of February. Get it done. Next, complete all your activity list. Really all parts of the Common App, except the custom prompts. Complete the family section, education section, profile section, testing section, activity section. I realize you can't do courses and grades until August, but most schools don't ask for courses and grades anyway. And that's just getting a transcript and making sure you meticulously transfer everything over. All right, additional information. Next, it's been reduced from 650 to 300 words. Are you going to use it? Make the decision if you're going to use it. And get your piece written now. You have to do it. Get it done if you're going to include something in additional information. Now, there's a new challenges and circumstances 250-word essay. Okay, this is replacing the community disruption essay, which can replace the COVID essay. If you're going to do that, get it done. You have to do it. It's a great time to do it. Let's bang it out. Secure commitments from all your rec writers, teacher recommendations, any other recommendation writer. Build a relationship with your school counselor and know how she or he communicates and what their expectations are. Research the custom prompts and any institutional questions that you're going to have to answer. Look at past prompts for the last couple years and get the 2026 ones in advance. That's your homework assignment for the next 60 days. You will be so grateful when you get to fall of your senior year and your peers are sweating it out. And they're like, I don't know what I'm going to write for my personal statement. I don't know what colleges I'm going to apply to. I didn't do that great on the SAT. Maybe I'll try the ACT. And it's like October, November. And you're going to be done with all of this stuff. All right, let's transition to the personal statement. Now, the personal statement is a 650-word essay that goes over to over 1,100 colleges that accept the Common App, the Common Application, better known as the Common App. Now, want a hint that is so simple but so profound? It's supposed to be personal, and you're supposed to make a statement. Now, geez, Stuck, that's all you've got? Well, I'm going to share a few tips today. It won't be comprehensive or exhaustive. We did 2 excellent interviews on the personal statement, in my opinion. Go back and listen to interview 27 with Susan Tree, 2 hours, chocked full of great insights. And interview 31 with Dr. Josie Urbistando, also an excellent interview. I encourage you to go back and listen to those in our archives for something more comprehensive. I'm just going to point out some things that I feel are missed opportunities if you don't do them. And I just woke up this morning and I took my pen and pad and just thought, what are some things you feel students, either when they do it, it makes something really pop, or when they don't do it, it's a missed opportunity. And I came up with, 15 or 17, and I want to share them with you. First point I want to make is to give you a framework and a way of thinking about the personal statement. I like to call it the what and the so what. Think of the what and the so what. Now, the what is going to be your story. It's what's going to allow me to see you in action. The so what is why the story you just told to me matters. So the so what is the reflection. The so what answers questions like how you've changed, how you've grown, what you care about, why you care about what you care about, how you see the world, what drives you, where you're going to make your mark, and why. I believe the best personal statements have at least 30% so what or reflection built into them. Now, it doesn't have to all be at the end. It can be sprinkled throughout or at the end. But one mistake I see is all story and no reflection, or one sentence of reflection. So let's give an example, try to make it more concrete and tangible. Let's say your story is about an encounter you had with a homeless person, and you found it riveting. You were riveted by their story. And let's say you say in the midst of sharing your story that when you came home, you said to your parents, what are we going to do about the homeless problem in our city? What are we going to do now? And then you go into that. You're moving into reflection. So reflection can be interspersed throughout the story. It can also be at the end. A lot of times the good ones have both. Many personal statements have these riveting personal stories, but they leave you flat because there's no reflection. Tip number 2. Before you write your personal statement draft, start by doing a lot of reflection on what your so what is going to be. Think of this as you answering this question. What are admission officers going to learn about me that they will not find out any other way, not through a transcript, test scores, rec letters, activity descriptions? What are they going to find out that's authentic, that's important to me, and enables them to see how I will make my impact on their campus and make it a better place? So let's stick with the homeless theme. Let's say your so what is the following. I'm a very empathetic and compassionate person who's deeply moved by people who are in distress situations. And I don't just keep my thoughts and emotions in my head. They spur me to action. Not only individual action, but to involve others in doing what we can and to do it now. So now that's what your hope that an AO admission officer will be your takeaway from your writing. So now that you know what you're hoping will be the takeaway, and of course this should be something that's an authentic passion, you're ready to start transitioning. So the third point is don't underestimate the power of story. Now, when I was getting my master's at Dallas Theological Seminary, I tried to focus on communications. So I took a lot of communications courses. And I'll never forget a course I took with Dr. Reg Grant. It was on the power of storytelling. And I remember at the start of class, he said, when you're a kid and you just say to your Mom, tell me a story. And then he said this. He said, you know what? Every single adult still feels the same way. Tell me a story. Why do you think movies are so compelling and captivating? Because of the power of storytelling, or a great novel. Stories are personal, persuasive, interesting, and memorable. When I was interviewing Christoph Gutentag at Duke, I asked him, why do you like Glimpse videos so much? Because he played a major role in Glimpse videos, taking a major role. I'd say probably the single most important person would be, the founders of the company we've interviewed twice, but Larry and Terry Crawford, besides them, of course. I'm talking about on the college side, Christoph Gutentag and Rick Clark, the two key people. So I said that to Christoph, and I loved his answer. He said, when I'm reading a file, I'm trying to visualize the person on my campus. And the Glimpse videos do help me to visualize the student on my campus. Well, guess what? Stories do that as well. Stories let me visualize you on my campus. Susan and I started working together in 2002. I was an adjunct college counselor. I was associate director of admissions, but I helped her out in any way that I could. And my role expanded when Brendan Barnard left. He was associate director to Susan in 2003. And the longer I live, the wiser I realize Susan is. So I interviewed Susan in 2019. I mentioned that a second ago. I really encourage you to check out interview 27. It's a 2-hour deep dive on the personal statement. But I remember saying to Susan, what do we want to call this? And she said, I'd like to call it, don't miss your opportunity to fill in the gaps and bring yourself to life. I didn't quite realize how profound every word of that was at the time, but I do now. Don't miss your opportunity to fill in the gaps and bring yourself to life. That's what you're trying to do with your personal statement. And stories bring you to life. Stories allow me to see you on your campus and to feel the emotion that comes with that. I often think when I'm preparing podcasts, what would our listeners be surprised about if they could spend a year or 2 or 5 doing admissions? Even a month, to be honest. Well, if it was a selective school, one of the things is how strong the applicant pool is. I feel it would be a very powerful way to learn to respect the competition, but we've talked about that a lot before. Here's another thing we haven't talked that much about. AOs develop such a human connection with students. I think listeners would be shocked to know the tears that get shed, to know the joy that gets shared, to know arguments that can even break out amongst staff when you want a kid so badly and somebody doesn't agree. I'll share something I've never shared with you before, and I'm going to name a name here. There is a student named Don Christian, and I interviewed him, read his file, deliberated over committee with him, and we actually admitted him, but he went to a competitor. And that still bothers me because I was so excited about what I felt he would do for our campus. Here's the key. That was 21 years ago, and I still remember that. I can remember 2 other students that I lost. I was so excited about it, both of them to Lawrenceville, by the way, boarding school and just outside of Princeton. So what made them come to life? It was the power of their stories. It's what produces that connection. Now, it's not only stories. Recommendations can have a very powerful effect, but there's nothing quite like the student voice. I still remember being riveted by a student named Wilson writing about his family coming over from Ecuador to New York City. Now, that student we got, and he went on to our school, and he crushed it. What I'm going to say next is important. Story is not your so what. Your story is the vehicle to convey the message. Your story is the vehicle to convey the message, but because stories are so personal, persuasive, interesting, and memorable, they're powerful. Just like a good movie. Stories are best when you have some suspense. You know, a couple of months ago, my brother pissed me off, and we're very close. But because I work a lot, and I do that because I love my job and I love working. When I watch my sports, I'm usually watching them like 1 a.m, really late, midnight, because everything's on DVR. Because I'm usually working because I got to meet with students when, they're not in school, which is evenings and weekends. So I'm watching the Duke-Houston game. This is the NCAA tournament. Duke's up by 13. They've been up the whole entire game. There's about 7 minutes left. My brother, since the time we were young, I mean, really young. I'm going back to Johnny Dawkins, Eugene Banks. I mean, Jay Billis, this is like 1979, 80. He is not like Duke. He calls them puke. And when my brother doesn't like something, he can't stand the Cowboys. That's his, oh my goodness, don't get him started. He is a stubborn mule. He's not changing. Anyway, he sends me a text. I'm watching the game. He says, puke lost. And I'm like, are you kidding me? Why? The whole story and the drama was ruined. So let your story have some twists and some unpredictability. When it's too predictable, then you get put on skim mode, where the admission officer just flies through. They look at it, but they fly through it really quickly. You get put on skim mode, oftentimes. Now, more on stories. Details matter. Be vivid in your descriptions. Be multisensory. Remember, the mind's a picture gallery, not an encyclopedia of facts. Ask yourself, am I making people see an image, hear a sound, smell a smell, feel a feeling, and especially see an image? Next, transparency and vulnerability. This is really powerful. Transparency and vulnerability, when it's done with authenticity, creates this unique bond with the admission officer. They feel honored that you've let them into your world. It projects humility. It projects comfort in your own skin and authenticity. And it's very powerful when done well. Next. Now, Julie and I, we did a recent segment on the personal statement where we focused on don't flex. Don't pound your chest in the personal statement. This is the one reason why the whole essay about how I got on the soccer field and first I didn't play that much in the first half, but then blah, 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 and I scored the winning goal. That's why oftentimes that one falls flat. One is predictable, so it loses its suspense. It's like my brother blowing up the Duke game for me. By the way, when I told him about it, he was right. He's like, why didn't you tell me you hadn't seen it? So it was on me. But anyway, let me get off that. But the other reason why that scored the winning goal falls flat is it's a flex. There's places to flex. Flex in your resume, flex in your activity section, flex in your honors section, your third-party substantiators, your rec writers. They'll flex for you. All right? But that's not the point I'm making here. The point I want to make here is one of the missed opportunities when you're the hero of your own story in a flexing type of way is you miss out on something that can really make the personal statement powerful. And that is to be more outward facing, to be more others oriented, to make sure you're showing specific ways in which you are helping others. And mission officers are drawn to people who want to change the world. And if you can show me you in action helping others, it has potential to be powerful. Not so much that you want to amass your fortunes in a self-aggrandizing way. A few years ago, I asked Susan for a second opinion on a personal statement that I really liked a lot. Susan read it and said, it's very good. It's very well done. But it would have been even better if it wasn't so inward focused on the own student. It showed me how the student wanted to help others. And she was right. Now, story. Let's go back to this. One of the misperceptions out there is you have to have this tearjerker. You have to have this distraught story. I remember a student of mine said to me probably 3 or 4 years ago, I said, what's wrong? We were talking about the personal statement. And he said, I'm screwed. I wasn't homeless. I don't have any story like that. How in the world am I going to compete? One of the biggest misperceptions is that you have to have the trauma drama as a way to impress. And I'll tell you, I'd like $1 for every admission officer that's told me, please don't have your students always write the trauma drama. We have to read these all day. Do you know what it's like reading 50 dejecting, heart-wrenching stories all day, feeling beaten down? So my next point is this. Make sure your personal statement inspires. The best ones are inspirational. Have a friend read it and ask them to rate it on a scale of 1 to 10 on the following metric. How inspirational was I? Once again, the best ones are inspirational. They don't deflate. Next point. And I've shared this, I believe I've shared this on the podcast before. We get new listeners all the time, and we have so much content, you won't remember everything anyway. But I produced this 10-hour video series on college admissions called Game Changers. It was like your counselor in a box. It's like your way of, you don't have to pay for private counseling. Here's your counselor in a box. Do it yourself. Took me 22 months to produce it, film crew. So we have a lake across from our house. So I had the film crew out there. And I picked up a little stone and I threw it. And of course, it made a little ripple. The film crew catches that. Then I picked up the biggest rock I could pick up, threw it in. And what did it do? It made a big splash. And I was making the point, admission officers want the student who's going to make the big splash. So how does that relate to your personal statement? Your personal statement should communicate how you will have positive impact. I oftentimes say to families, I can tell you what schools are looking for in 2 words, positive impact. Positive impact in the classroom, positive impact in the dorms, in the dining room, on the sports fields, in conversations. Classroom, positive impact. Next, your intro should do 2 things. It should grab them and hook them. That's one thing it should do. Now, I interviewed David Graves, Dean, Director of Admission at the University of Georgia, maybe a little less than a year ago now. And Dave's been at Georgia, is it 27 years? I think it's 27 years now. But I've heard him share this story before. He talks about essay he remembers the most. And he says it started out going something like this. As I got into the back seat, the patrol car door slammed shut. The doors locked. This was going to be an interesting ride. And as David says, you can't help but want to read this essay. A great intro hooks the reader in so you don't get put on skim mode. I call it the Kate test for me. So Kate was my boss in admissions. Her office was 2 doors down. And I always say, if Kate were to call me and say, hey, I need you, would I be like, oh man, you're killing me right in the middle of this essay? I don't want to leave it. Next, don't take too long to introduce your theme. Really good introductions grab you, but then pretty shortly after they introduce you to the theme. The mind craves that order. Some of the least effective personal statements I read, I'm halfway through them and I'm asking myself, now where's this going? It's all over the place. And even well-crafted sentences don't land if I can't put them in the context of where it's going. All right, next point, I want to draw off what I said in my second point, which talked about starting with your so what and having your so what in mind. Every sentence of the personal statement should in some way advance the argument you are making. A lot of people don't think of it this way, but this is a form of persuasive writing. Even that it's creative, it's also persuasive writing. And when you're proofing, ask yourself, how does this sentence advance my argument? Too many times students go on and on and on with so many details, extraneous details in their story that I call it wasted real estate. It's wasted real estate. You want enough details so I know where you're going, but don't forget, everybody's tuned into radio station WIIFM. What's in it for me, right? So admission officers are reading to get to know you, but they're also reading through the prism of how is the student going to help our college? And if you get to that too late, it tends to not be very effective. All right, next. Good storytelling should not only be in the what, but also in the so what. Too many students have great storytelling in their description phase to let me see them in action, but they don't have any storytelling at all that shows how they've taken the lessons they've learned and applied them. They go to telling then. And once again, showing is always more impactful than telling. Showing is storytelling. And once again, that's personal, persuasive, interesting, and memorable. Next, admission officers can intuit. So let's go with the homeless, compassionate theme I talked about earlier. They don't need you to say, therefore, I will be a compassionate person on any college campus I am, and I will be empathetic. It feels too contrived. It feels too forced. It feels too inauthentic. You don't need to spell it out like that. They can intuit, and it's more powerful, and it's more natural. Conclusions, and we could do a whole hour section on conclusions. Maybe we will someday. Maybe we'll do a whole hour just on conclusions and introductions, but end with a bang. There's lots of different ways to do it, and we don't have time to cover all of them today. But don't just go with the summary ending that doesn't add anything and just, synopsis of what you've already said before. Those tend to fall flat. End with like some staccato, something punchy. And that tends to be a really powerful way to end. All right. Next, make sure you get to your why behind your what. Personal statement is about how you want to be a baseball coach. Let's say that's what your personal statement's on. Well, that could land really flat. You just tell me about why you want to be a baseball coach. But if you get into how your baseball coach, when you were 11 years old, was a mentor who taught you discipline, time management, how to invest, and how to win graciously and lose graciously, and you want to be like Coach Lee for another 11-year-old boy out there, now I know your why behind your what. That's really important. Last one I'll say is be careful about too many cooks in the kitchen. You have 6 master cooks and you put them in your kitchen and say, hey, make macaroni and cheese or baked chicken or whatever. You're going to have all kind of different opinions. So just be careful about having too many different people read it because everybody's going to have an opinion. You're going to be going crazy. So friends, those are just a few things that popped in my head. We could easily do a part 2, 3, or 4. Hopefully you found that helpful. Let's transition to the last part of my interview with Dr. John Pollard, Dean of Franke, University of Arizona's Honors College.
And now this week's interview with a special guest.
Friends, in the final part of John Pollard's interview on Franke Honors College, Dean John continues talking about admissions criteria at Franke. John talks about how they evaluate a student and how an application is read and what's prioritized in the file reading. John talks about how you can reach out to Franke directly for assistance when completing your application. And John talks about his pet peeve that students do when applying. And then John goes on the hot seat in the lightning round. Listen and enjoy.
By the way, there's 3 ways to enter the Franke Honors College.
Yeah, talk about that.
Yeah, there's the traditional way, which is applying out of high school. And that's where it's the most competitive, actually, because everyone wants in. Then we have students who come in through transfer, and that's through community colleges and stuff like that. And so we have some amazing students that come through that portal. It's a smaller number, but we do have that. And then we have what I'm really proud of is we have this third pathway we call the current Wildcat, which is students who have been here a semester and want in and apply, and really they just get all they have to do is get a great GPA that first semester, and if they want in, they're in.
What kind of GPA are you looking for?
Well, the
competitive?
minimum GPA to stay in Franke is 3.4. So it was 3.5 when I first came over here, and we lowered it a little bit because we sometimes saw students that were really amazing. We wanted to take the emphasis off the grades a little bit and make it more about the engagement. So we adjusted that down 0.1. But
Sure.
most of the students who come into our current Wildcat are 4.0s, 3.9s, 3.8s. And they just want the honors experience. They've learned about it. Some of them want to try to move into the honors village when the slot opens. So there's the current Wildcat is another way that we're drawing students into the Franke Honors College.
And when if you were to break them down, like what percentage are coming straight out of high school versus the transfer pathway versus the current Wildcat pathway?
I would say this is roughly, I would say if we took 1,000 students in the Honors College, 850 came in through the traditional way, but 100 came in through the current Wildcat, and maybe 50 through transfer. So it's something like that, 85% roughly through the front door.
And as far as what you're looking for, you've already said one thing. You said two things, actually. You're going to have a very strong transcript. If the average unweighted GPA is north of 3.9, that gives us a sense of a profile of the student. Can you be test optional? What role did test scores play in the assessment?
We're test optional. And by the way, with the GPA, we accept students with lower than the 3.9. That's the average.
Sure.
It just depends on how involved they are, the rigor of their courses. We take that into consideration. So some students will go to high schools where the courses are more rigorous, and so therefore they're disadvantaged a little bit because they get a little bit lower grades. We take that into account. We also take into account students will come from rural schools where there isn't the opportunity to take AP courses, but they are standouts and have amazing experiences. But the other two things are, three things really. What is their, when they write their letter of intent, what do they say about why they want to be in the Honors College? Second is they need a letter of recommendation, and we really take that letter of recommendation seriously. We want that letter to reflect something about that student that's beyond like, oh, they're a good student, like something that's distinctive about the student and why that recommender would think they'd be good at Franke. And then the third thing is, have they been involved in things outside of just being in classes? Are they involved in extracurricular activities, in service or in community, things like that? We like to hear about students who have done more than that, because that's the kind of profile of a student we like to bring into the Franke Honors College. And by the way, if you can tour the Franke Honors College, my admissions team, will sit down with students and help them with, like, this is what you need to think about when you write your application to Franke. We're transparent about this.
That's good.
So we're not trying to like keep it secret. We'll tell you, this is how you get in. And we get some really amazing students. And unfortunately, we're starting to have a problem now. We're starting to deny students into the Honors College because we just can only take so many. If you look at these students on paper, they look great, but there's levels to this in terms of the applications. So
sure. What percentage is Franke with Arizona versus non-Arizona residents? And is there a preference given to Arizona, residents?
There is not a preference given to Arizona residents. I mean, there's some scholarship programs like the Flynn Scholarship, which is exclusive for Arizona residents. But we're about 60-40, 60% in-state, 40% out-of-state. Because we're a land-grant institution, I think I want all the top Arizona students to come to Franke. And if they don't, then they should go to Barrett or NAUs, so we want to keep those students in state for sure. But also, too, I think there's a lot to offer these out-of-state students. And land-grant mission is not just about your state anymore and your locality. It's about serving the country and the globe. So that's where we're at, about 60-40.
That's great. So we're about to transition to our lightning round. We call it the hot seat. Before we do and leave admissions talk, anything about Franke we haven't said yet, John, that you want to make sure our listeners know?
I would encourage people to go check out our website. I would encourage people to check out the It's an Honor podcast. You can learn more about myself and the types of things that are going on at Franke. There's a lot of partnerships we have with, for example, we have a program called the I call it the Franke. We have a school of business here called the Eller School of Business, and we have a partnership with them where Franke honor students work in interdisciplinary teams to solve data analytics problems for companies. We had Frontier Airlines brought some sort of logistics problem to a interdisciplinary group of Franke students, and they did such a great job on the project that Frontier flew all 5 of the students up to their headquarters and offered them jobs after they graduated. So
Wow.
we just have a lot. We're really plugged into the other colleges and the experiences here. But I think the one I think I would say is, if you can, come visit us, because I think you got to see it for real here. Come see Franke and come see us, and hopefully I'll meet some of the people who visit.
Yeah, no, definitely look up John if you're coming to check out Franke. People sometimes don't realize how approachable our guests are.
Yeah.
So tell us some more about the It's an Honor podcast. Obviously, that's your podcast. How long you've been doing it? How many episodes do you have out there? And what's the format? What do you talk about in there?
Yeah, so we've been doing it for a little over a year now, a year and a half. It's a long form podcast. So we have discussions from 45 minutes to an hour and 15, roughly. And really, for me, it's been about sort of an open discussion. I'll have everything from some of the amazing researchers here at the University of Arizona. I had Desiree Reed-Francois, the athletic director here at the University of Arizona. I had community leaders and alumni that are amazing, who have done amazing things, who are alumni of the Honors College here. I had Mark and Mindy Zeitzer. They're innovators in healthcare space up in the Oregon space. I just had Bill Mensch on, who is the lead designer of the 6502 microprocessor, which was the microprocessor that revolutionized computing. So I like to have all different types. I have one of the leading architects in the state on here talking about design work. So it's really something that really expresses sort of the value of curiosity. And by the way, at the Franke Honors College, we have 5 values that we use to guide us. And we say we seek, we connect, we create, we evolve, and we celebrate. And it's kind of a cycle. And so the podcast is centered around those things: seeking knowledge, connecting with people. We want to turn our students from knowledge consumers to knowledge creators. But how do people create knowledge and innovate? Evolving, that's the resilience. That's the how do you know that, you can't have success without challenge? They go together. And then, of course, celebrating joy in life and things like that. That's what the podcast has got. If you go to Apple or Spotify or any places, you can see it and check it out, and love for people to listen to it.
No, I think if anyone is seriously thinking about Franke, they need to, why would you not check that out?
Check it out.
Of course. Awesome. Great. This has been amazing. I'm going to ask you what your pet peeve is that students do in the Honors College that grinds your gears.
They don't read their emails. That's my pet peeve.
Well, they're not the only ones. That's not limited to Franke. I can assure you of that.
There it is right there. It's my pet peeve. They don't read their emails. But, I guess that goes for everybody these days. But
sure. Yeah. Usually texting is better.
Yeah.
Group text.
Communicating with students these days is a real challenge. And, no one is better at attending to things than honors students. They're really actually really good. And even they can be a challenge. And I know all my honors dean colleagues out there know what I'm talking about. So
Sure. What advice do you have for your 18-year-old self there, John?
Whew.
I know it's deep.
Well, I would just tell my 18-year-old self, just keep staying curious, because I think that curiosity and a drive to know and learn and to be creative was the one thing I had going for me. I wasn't maybe the most mature person at 18 for sure. But I was curious, and I had a sense of wanting to know. And I think that and to learn and to evolve. And so I think I would just tell myself, keep doing that. And also, chill out. You got time. trust me, you got more time than you think. So relax. What's all the anxiety about over this and that? So I'd probably
Sure.
tell them that.
How do you relax? How do you chill? How do you unwind when you're not working?
Well, one of the things I love doing is mountain biking. I'm a big mountain biker.
Nice.
I just love getting out in the Sonoran Desert. It's my special place on my bike, and I love doing that. Of course, I love spending time with my family too. My wife. We've got 3 kids. She got a daughter who's in the honors college. Her dorm room, I can see her dorm room.
How does she feel about
Yeah,
that?
she
That's the
loves
question.
that, right? It's like she dreamt of. No, she wanted to be in the honors college, and I
Sure.
think there was, oh, I'm going to see you all the time, Dad. Like, you never see me, and I actually do never see her, so which is funny. But obviously the family's, that is part of it as well. But for me personally, mountain biking. I also love. I've been a musician my whole life. I play a lot of instruments.
Oh, what's your instrument, or do you sing, or what do you do?
Oh, I don't sing. I'll tell you that. I started playing organ and keyboards when I was a kid, and then I played trumpet through high school, and then I started playing bass guitar, and our jazz ensemble. I played that all through college, and then in bands when I was in graduate school. I played guitar and drums, and also I'm just a big collector of music, vinyl, CDs. I just love music of all kinds, so I'm a big audiophile, and so music's a huge part of my life. Music, mountain biking, family. Yeah. And I like food too.
There you go. Most people do. What's on your bucket list?
Well, there's some traveling, some places that I haven't been that I definitely want to go.
Give me one of them.
Japan.
Yeah.
I really, really, really want to go to Japan. I haven't been to Hawaii either. My wife and I were just talking about that.
That's a great place.
So it's more in that direction. So I think that's probably some of the bucket list stuff for me is some travel destinations that I haven't done. That's probably
nice.
on the top of the list.
Is there a book that you recommend parents read? Don't give me some biochem book now.
No. Well, there's a couple. There's one book that I think I recommend to students. I would recommend to anybody. It's called Atomic Habits by James Clear. And the book, I think it's a very easy read, but the book talks about, it sort of presents ideas of ways to think about habits in change in your life, and it presents a really interesting thesis that centers around developing an identity around what you want to change into, as opposed to making it a goal. And I don't want to spoil it, but I think it's a New York Times bestseller. So Atomic Habits by James Clear is a book I would recommend anybody who's interested in exploring change in their life, and there's nothing more constant than change, right? And personal change. So that's one I would recommend for any parent, or in particular any student. I recommend this to students a lot because I think it applies a lot towards students want to change their habits toward their studying, or change this or that. And this book really speaks to ways to think about that.
This is awesome. My last question: your best advice for students, parents, and college counselors, which are 3 groups of listeners.
Yeah.
And you've already given a couple good ones away. You've talked about be curious, and you've talked about, hey, don't be in a rush. You have a lot of life ahead of you. It's not a mad dash here.
Yeah.
But any other nugget?
Let go. This goes to the parents.
Yeah.
Want to let go a little bit. I think all of us who are in higher education, especially when we're very undergraduate facing, we face a lot of what are classified as helicopter parents, or drone parents, or whatever you want to call it. And I think parents, and a lot of them are my age too, I get that. Mm-hmm. And I think that thing that I've learned is that, you've got to let your kid face some struggle. And I think sometimes parents have a hard time letting go, and sending your kid off to college, even if it's in the same town, or especially if it's out of town, that's stressful. That can be a really hard thing for people to do. And with the technology we have now, we can constantly be in touch with them and constantly generate anxiety about what's going on. And I think you've got to let go a little bit and trust them. If they pick a major and you're like, what are you going to do? Just let go. Let let them, as Mel Robbins says, just let it be, and give them some space to explore. I think that with the love and support, you pick the right place that's going to nurture their ability to thrive. That's what I would say. For college counselors, I mean, they do such amazing work. So shout out to all the college counselors out there. My biggest advice to them is make sure you check out Franke Honors College at the University of Arizona.
There you go. I love it. True believer.
If you don't know about this place, you should put this in your.
So here's the good news: if they're hearing this, they've just learned a lot in the last 25 minutes.
Yeah. So, but keep doing your great work, and college is still, we know, is one of the most transformative things that happens to young students, and so. Just keep helping students get to that college experience, because I think it's so important. That's what I would say to them. And to students, like I said, relax, make sure, seek connections, connect with people, be creative, know that, like, you can't have up without down. You can't have success without struggle. Just lean into that mindset, that generative mindset, and have fun.
There we go. I love it. So, John, tell our listeners, if they want to know more about Franke besides the podcast, is there a website, a Franke website you can give us? Is there Instagram, or what do you recommend?
We got it both. And by the way, I'm kind of viral on our Instagram site. But
there you go.
So if you want to follow Franke Honors College on Instagram, we got top level honors college game there. Franke.honors.arizona.edu. And if you can't remember that, you can just Google Franke Honors College, Franke, Franke is how it's spelled. And then you go to our website.
Get that right. Dave and Bill would not have been happy if you didn't correct that.
Franke. And go to our website, but you can reach out to us. All of our contact links are on there, and people can email me directly too. And if I don't know the answer to it, I can find the person who does. And I've been at the University of Arizona a long time. I know a lot about this place. I know a lot of people. I have amazing staff and faculty here, so we're ready to answer your questions. And there's no bad questions when it comes to making decisions about where you're going to, send your kid to college. So we're happy to answer them all. And so go check it out there.
John, this has been awesome. Thank you for being so generous with your time. You gave us an hour and 20 minutes, and we're most grateful. And thank you. I just want to keep in touch with you. I'm excited about the stuff you're doing.
Thanks, Mark. Appreciate it. And thanks to everybody. And I hope everyone has a great day. Go Cats.
Friends, John is sincere when he says reach out to him if you need help. John can be reached at jpollard@arizona.edu.
And now this week's interview with a special guest.
Friends, Kevin is going to talk about an opportunity I think could help a lot of people who are interested in learning more about international universities. What I'm going to share is not free, but the cost is really reasonable, and he's giving a special price for our listeners. I would never share anything with you I didn't think could help our listeners, and I would never share anything that I didn't feel was affordable. But if you're not interested in hearing about this opportunity, feel free to stop listening to this episode at this point. So, friends, Kev is back, and I'm kind of excited. He's going to do something a little different. It's something that the two of us have been talking about him doing for, I don't know, over 6 months.
It seems like that. I think I've driven you nuts. I know I've talked to Julia a lot about this. I've driven her nuts. My wife has just started throwing things at me. It is.
Well, let's put a positive tone on it. It's exciting to me. So what's this? Get to it. So I'll just introduce it. The demand has been off the chain for people to understand their international options. And so in order to accommodate that demand, Kevin is launching like small group type classes.
Right.
And of course, the advantage to a class is that you can spread the cost out about multiple people, and then you can take sort of the barrier of cost off the table, and, in terms of it being cost prohibitive. And so it's very affordable. And I told him, I said, this is something some of our listeners might be interested in. So I'll just tee it up with that and let you go into the details. Like, let people, and me, I'll have some questions. So why don't you give an overview, and then I'll do what I always do, ask questions.
Well, I think first of all, thank you for letting me talk about this a little bit. I think that what kind of spurred it along was for reasons, and we can all use our imagination as to why. A lot of interest has increased, and it's it is something that for a growing number of people is a worthwhile opportunity. Now, is it the right fit for everyone? Of course not. Mark, one of the things that you and I have always emphasized when we talk to students, when we are on the podcast, when we are out in the street, just randomly discussing our work, is that fit matters. And what we kind of started to look at was how can we expose more people to kind of just dip their toe in, see if going overseas is the right fit for them, and give them the tools they need to walk through the application process and do everything, and it not be a minefield of mistakes, because there's a lot of misinformation out there. I mean, we talk a lot about the importance of things like accreditation. We talk about which, of course, the end of the day, what you're looking for is that they're affiliated in some way to the relevant Ministry of Education or Department of Education. And we talk about, how is the degree going to be viewed back in the US? How is it going to help me get a job? All of these different things. So what I've been working on for the past several months, and again, driving you nuts, driving Julia nuts, driving Kate nuts, driving the guy down the street nuts, driving everyone nuts with questions, is a way to kind of compartmentalize this into, a 3-week course that meets once a week. And we discuss everything from how to avoid those minefields, how to zero in on the best options possible, how to do the application, the tricky questions on UCAS, because there are some that, I talk to people who work for UCAS. I'm like, could you think of a more obstructed way of asking this question? Because, I don't know, what's going through your mind right now. And even how to find those opportunities for merit or need-based aid overseas, what that even looks like. And to really, like you said, just create an environment where it's people who can, they might not need the one-on-one help, because, one-on-one help is ideal, don't get me wrong. But at the same time, if you're looking at, say, putting in an application to a few UCAS programs, or maybe you want to look, just to know, well, why should I even be looking at Australia or New Zealand? Just the chance to come in at a lower price point, to have less of a burden of moving forward on it, and to know that, rather than making the investment and building the relationship of working one-on-one and then it not being exactly what you wanted at the end, that you've got exactly what you came to get out of it. You've got completed applications. You've got a good understanding of how you fit into this process, regardless if it's the UK, if it's someplace in the EU like Ireland or the Netherlands or Spain or Italy, or whether it's Australia or New Zealand. And, we're even doing this for grad school as well. Mark, I don't know if you know this, way back when I actually got my start doing this for graduate students.
Well, boy, I'm learning something every time. Our last time I recorded it was the first time I had it confirmed that you did graduate stuff, and now I'm finding out that's where you got your start.
I mean, it's always been a lot of fun, and it was something that, admittedly, I do find the aspect of working with students fun. Mark, is something that and you're far too kind to say, but I hope you'll get a chuckle out of it. I'm a huge nerd.
Well, we all know that, man.
And
first of all, just what your master's degree in speaks volumes.
Look, my grandmother is tired of explaining to the ladies at First Baptist that, Islamic and Chinese law is a legitimate thing to study. But no, it was looking at the opportunity to help more people.
Sure.
And, we've, through trial and error, and, I've had workshops in the past that I've learned a lot from, but, it's always been kind of smaller groups, under 5. And a lot of times and the opportunity to do this in such a way that gives people the chance to, again, come in at a lower price point, get exactly what they need, and to end up with exactly the plan they need going forward.
All right, so let me ask a few questions. You said 3 sessions. So how long are these sessions, and what are we talking? June, July, August? Like, when would they meet?
So the way it's set up is you would pick a month, June, July, August, or September. And for 3 weeks, those are our 3 sessions because I'm a firm believer in just getting this stuff done.
Sure,
It's
sure.
it's a completely different paradigm than the American system, but we can do this in a pretty straightforward manner.
So how many people would be in the group?
I think the group format really lends itself to having the questions asked that, it draws on my experience as a classroom teacher, where if one person has a question, chances are someone else does. So it gives us a chance to really cover a lot of the same things. And since the camps are grouped according to, interest, it does give us the potential to do that. So we are capping the camps at around 15 people per session. So you still get that small group feeling, but at the same time, it's drawing on my days as a classroom teacher. 15 people's about that sweet spot where, you don't feel bad piping up and asking a question. And again, the live part of the camps is really going to be devoted as much as possible to questions and answers and making sure everyone understands everything. A lot of the substantive information is pre-recorded or it's already done. And of course, we're going to talk about it and walk through it in the online sessions, but I want to leave the live time open for questions and answers so that you're not on the hook trying to, after agreeing to do this, not having the time you need to get your questions answered. Like, I really think that that's beneficial because, this could be the old teacher in me coming out. If you've got a question, chances are somebody else has the same question.
Sure. So are you using like one of the platforms out there that has, the apparatus, this kind of thing? Is it, Zoom or Microsoft Teams or Google Meet, or how you doing it?
It'll all be via Zoom. I've got a platform actually right now that I'm putting the finishing touches of that provide email reminders and host different documents and things like that. So it's all a one-stop shop. You won't have to go digging through your emails for anything. It will all be on a portal that's integrated and has everything you need. So
will this be up on your Education Abroad website? Like, how are people going to learn it? Learn if they want to know, well, what are the dates and times?
Right. So I'll have a full calendar of everything posted up on the website, and you can go actually right now and check it out. Mark, I gotta say, this is kind of a hard thing to be talking about, something so salesy.
I'm the one who told you, I think our listeners would be interested in this. It's not like you said to me, can I talk to the podcast listeners about this? So take some comfort in that. I just try to provide opportunities. So
no, and I keep having to remind myself that, like, as we've talked about from years ago, our very first conversation, one of the reasons our business models are built, and yours is much more evolved in this matter than I am, is to give access for this information on a broader scale. I mean, 10 years ago, the idea of going overseas was something that if you weren't a dual citizen or here on a green card or something like that, you did if you were filthy rich. And it's something that, I've really enjoyed playing a small part in the democratization. Wow. This is what happens when you do a Chinese final before you get on a podcast recording of this process and making it so that more and more families can view this as an option. And I think this is another key part of that is because, one-on-one time, it's expensive, it's, and finding a way to help people through that process. And also, something we've always done is we've collaborated on a number of students. You've handled the American side of things. I'll do the European or the Australian or New Zealand side of things. Is I routinely give discounts for someone who's already, using your services because let's face it, if you're talking to them about the ACT or SAT, I don't have to talk to them about the ACT or SAT.
Well, you said something extremely important to me, and that was access, democratization of the process. I mean, it's when, if you were doing this and it was, thousands of dollars, I wouldn't have had you come on, right? Is when I found out, kind of like what you're charging, that I said, okay, I'm comfortable. I feel like this is something our listeners would want to know about. And
Right.
I can see listeners that may not even be leaning toward, having their student go to an overseas school, but they're just so curious that they just want to understand it better. Sometimes I'll have listeners say to me that they really love college spotlights on some of the schools that, for lack of a better word, may be more obscure. And they'll say, it's not like my student would ever consider that school, but I just find it fascinating learning about colleges that I've never heard of before. And so we do have that type of curiosity in our listenership. I feel like, colleges are always, especially more selective colleges, they put a tremendous emphasis on IC, what some people call IC, intellectual curiosity. I feel like our audience gets an A+ on that. We have just a very curious audience. And so I just see people wanting to know that, just to learn a little bit about how the system works in other parts of the world. Not everybody. People are busy. So how long will the sessions be?
So currently the sessions are scheduled, depending on the topic, between 90 minutes and 2 hours. I'm erring towards 2 hours on most of them because, again, I want there to be a lot of interaction.
Sure.
I want there to be plenty of time for questions. I'm targeting only having about 45 minutes to an hour of new information being introduced, because I really am. And again, that will be not only in the live sessions, but also available in a pre-recorded format, because I really think that, the benefit of that, and I've told this to numerous people, is there's no secret sauce to what I do. You can go out and you can Google and you can get 3/4 of the way there. I would say you could use AI, but from what I've seen when my parents and students come back and they've tried to use AI, I just want to hold my head in my hands and go, no, that's so wrong. But AI is still learning, and that's
sure
for another day. But it is that kind of opportunity to essentially ask questions, to figure out what is it that how does this apply to me? Like, say that you're filling out UCAS and you've got some. I had a student this past year who could choose between listing their APs as either APs or dual enrollments, because technically they were both. How do I list that so I get the most benefit from that? And it's a question that differs. I mean, a place like St. Andrews, they're going to be fine either way. A place like Oxford, you better believe they should all be listed as AP courses. A place like, I'm trying to think of some place that really wouldn't care. Actually, a number of universities wouldn't care at this point anymore. But depending on the advantage there, if you're going to get an A in the dual enrollment class or a 4 on the AP exam, which foot do you put forward? And those are the kinds of things that are a little difficult to Google. And, it's at the risk of sounding salesy. That's where my value offer is to be able to say, well, given that you're looking at these places, this is what you should do.
Now, is this something that's like similar to a college class in the sense that the student is the one who's there and parents are not welcome? Or is it more akin to like an information session or something where, there's a format or some avenue for a parent that wants to get information besides just whatever their kid tells them?
I'm a firm believer. I'm not going to say that parents aren't welcome, but I'm a really firm believer in the decision of where to apply to college and where ultimately to go to college. It's really the first big adult decision someone makes. I mean, it's not to say that you make it by yourself. It's not to say you don't have a supportive group of people who are helping you and guiding you. But when I was 17, looking at, different colleges, ultimately where I went, that still matters. I don't want to say to a great degree, but, it dictated who I'm going to be friends with. What even geographically, I'm an oddball that I live in Dallas and went to William and Mary. There are a handful of us. I just went to a child's birthday party this week where the dad went to William and Mary and was actually in, some of my classes, good friend of mine. But it is that kind of, I want this student to have ownership of this. When I'm talking to a new student and they're trying to explore the concept of working with me one-on-one, I'm really clear because, you talk to the parent and then I talk to the student. I'm like, you're the boss. I ultimately work for you. So if you don't like me, we can just shake hands over Zoom and call it a day because I don't want to waste your time. I don't want to make you miserable. And that said, there are definitely those families who, let me choose my words here carefully, benefit from both the parent and the student being involved because the student, they may have a lot on their plate and the parent feels that one of their jobs as a parent is to be a de facto project manager of maybe not the college application process, but that student's life. And look, Mark, I don't have a kid. I certainly don't have a kid who's going through this process. I'm not going to judge. The only exception is, of course, and this is just all sorts of ethical things. If you're the parent doing the entire application process for your kid, then that's a problem. But that's a problem for us to talk about later. With other colleagues in the field.
Well, this has been awesome, Kevin. I just like to bring opportunities, we call them recommended resources, but this is more of a little mini interview one. What you're developing and building over there. So if people want to learn more, just go to An Education Abroad, and then what would they look for?
Right. It'll be a drop-down menu. I'm probably going to put it in the next couple of days, just right there, front and square on the homepage, but it will be under one of the drop-down menus at the top. And, I will also say if you're a listener to this podcast, we will, and Mark will work on a way to distribute this. I've got a coupon code for you because frankly, that means that you're already ahead of the game. If you're listening to stuff that we're talking about here on Your College Bound Kid, that, it means that you're already pretty well educated. And I would be a hypocrite if I didn't want to reward education.
Well, everybody likes a little bit of extra shekels in the purse or wallet, so I'm sure that's appreciated. So thank you for coming on, my friend, and talking about this.
Thanks for having me. Like I said, I look forward to going back to being a bit more focused on things other than salesmanship. So thank you again, Mark.
Yeah, I know. It's always more uncomfortable talking about yourself. Like, this wasn't hard for me, but don't get me talking about myself in that way. It's just it feels like, this is how it feels to me. It feels like a violation of the sacred trust that listeners give you, that they're going to come and learn and not get pitched to. It just really feels really icky to me. But I can go on all day about a book I like or a website or a person doing something like what you're doing. It's just when it's yourself, I guess you feel, it feels like, why run the risk of doing something that could be perceived as self-serving? And then, Kevin, you've already told our listeners that they can go to your website, aneducationabroad.com, and you've said the price is there, but can you tell our listeners what the course is going to cost them?
The price per camp is $599, but as a listener of Your College Bound Kid, you do get a 10% discount. Just put in the coupon code YCBK10. That's YCBK, all in capital letters, and then the numbers 10 for 10. So YCBK 10.
On Thursday's episode, Hillary will answer a question from a listener who has heard that some colleges are using likes and shares to track demonstrated interest, and she wants to know if this is correct. And we'll have a second question. Julia will join me to answer a question from a listener who wants to know if a student qualifies for a fee waiver and they use it, does it stigmatize the student for colleges that are need aware? We'll have the final part of Lisa's interview. Adrian Amador Adi, the VP of Enrollment at Queen's University in Charlotte, and she is cleaning up some misconceptions about how financial aid and merit scholarships work. We'll have part 2 of my interview with Dr. Bob McMahon, the president of Kettering University in Flint, Michigan. And friends, remember, it's not where you go. It's not where you go. It's not where you go. It's what you do when you get there, and it's what you do when you get out of there. That is what will determine your career success. And I believe that every fiber of my being. See you on Thursday, friends. And that's our show. A big thank you to you, our listeners, for tuning in this week. If you find this podcast helpful, please follow us and you will get every single episode as soon as they are released. If you want to support our podcast, you can click the share button and send it to your friends and acquaintances. You can say positive things about your college-bound kid on your social media feed. And you can help us stay commercial-free and pay our staff by donating on the yourcollegeboundkid website. You can write a review for us on Apple or Spotify. And if you have a question or a recommendation, just go to speakpipe.com/YCBK, hit the orange button, and speak. We will do our best to get your question in your own voice on an upcoming episode. I am the producer of the podcast, and I live in Metro Atlanta. We have a fantastic team that has over 200 years of admissions and counseling experience. Shout out to our co-hosts, Dr. Lisa Ruff in North Carolina, Susan Tree in Pennsylvania, Vince Garcia in California, Julia Esquivel in Massachusetts, Linda Depker in Missouri, Andy Strickler, the Chief Enrollment Officer at Connecticut College, New London, Connecticut, Hillary Dickman, an Admission Officer at Colorado College in Colorado Springs, and our International Admissions Expert, Kevin Newton in Dallas, Texas. Our sensational sound engineer is Nemanja Motvich. Our amazing music is from Victor Allen Weeks. Marketing designs from Kimberly Bloss. Our reliable webmaster is Stylionis Dimitru. Website updates are done by Joyce Stucker. Our image editor is Vlad Honchar. If you want to have a coaching session with me, just text me at 404-664-4340. If you want to reach someone else on our team, all of our bios with contact info can be found at yourcollegeboundkid.com under the About YCBK tab. If you want to get our free monthly YCBK newsletter, YCBK Plus, it is also under the About YCBK tab. If you want to see our recommended books and websites, they are on our website under the Resources tab. While you're on our website, check out our hundreds of interviews in their entirety. Check out our college spotlights, our blog, and our upcoming events. We think of you as our listening family, and we look forward to meeting with you every single Monday and every single Thursday.